views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening. Welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program that talks to journalists and writers and editors and filmmakers and photographers and really anybody putting something out in the borough of the Bronx. And this evening, we're going to do something we have never done before. We brought two personnel from one newspaper, and it is really a legendary newspaper in the borough of the Bronx. We're talking about the Riverdale Press. And they've just won a whole slew of awards, which they seem to win every year. And they're going to talk about that and also about issues that not only pertain to their direct locale, but using that as a prism to look out at the rest of the Bronx and the rest of the city. So without further ado, it is the editor of the Riverdale Press, Michael Hinman. Nice to have you with us, Mr. Hinman.
Thank you so much, Mr. Axelbank.
It's funny being so formal because we are so friendly with each other. So I probably will call you Michael through the program. But Kirsten,
not like you normally do. So that's
what's that?
This is not Mikey like you normally do.
Mikey, yeah, I don't think you don't strike me as a Mikey.
No,
anyway, Kirsten Brendland is a staff reporter. She does politics also for the Riverdale Press. This is her second appearance. Michael has been on here more the times than we can count. Kirsten, so nice to have you back with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's start off, Michael, about the awards you won. Let's list them, and then I want to delve into the Riverdale Press as a newspaper and a news operation. So congratulations. I mean, the New York Press Awards, these are very, very prestigious awards. If you get awarded from your industry for what you do, it's a beautiful, wonderful thing. Congratulations.
Yeah, the New York Press Association is a great organization. It's a statewide organization, has, I think, a few hundred papers, a couple hundred papers. They do an annual contest. They've done it for many, many years. A lot of states do it. I think we had 170 newspapers participate this year. I think 3,000 entries or close to 3,000 entries popped in. And a lot of awards that we all have to fight for. Every other year, we have to go up a circulation category because we compete by circulation, but we sometimes have to be bumped up every other year. So we were competing against much larger papers than normal.
Well, why would you, I have to ask that, why would you be bumped up? And
I think it's
fair is fair, no?
Well, I think what's partially is because a lot of newspapers are in groups. So we're part of a chain, and a lot of other papers are part of a chain. And a lot of times those chains get the benefit of being, so you might be a smaller paper, but you might be in the same building as like a larger paper. So you get some of the benefits. You get more staff sometimes or better resources. We actually don't get that in Riverdale. We're kind of our own little island.
Even though you are part of a larger
group.
Group.
So, but we have to go with the circulation of our largest paper, which isn't us actually. We actually have a paper who circulates a little bit more than us on Long Island, and so that bumps us up a category every other year. So it's a way of being fair to some of the other papers who don't have that luxury, even though we don't actually have that luxury either. But because of the way the rules are, we get bumped up, so we have to compete a little bit higher.
And the competition is you just submit what you think is your best work in various categories.
Yep.
And so what did you win? What happened?
Well, we got the biggest one we got was first place for news story. We got first and second in news story, actually. Our first place story was a group project that Kirsten, I, and a former reporter, Heather J. Smith, did that was on the New York Health Act, basically exploring why it hasn't happened yet, when it's going to happen, if it can happen, what are the obstacles. So we were very proud of that story. And then Kirsten could tell you more.
Well, I want to ask her about that. Kirsten, when you were working on that story, two things. One is, did you know it might be good enough to win an award? And number two, was it in the back of your mind you know what, let's put this one out? Or is it one of those things where you just do your writing and you say, I don't even know about that stuff?
Yeah, for that one, it definitely wasn't is something that I was thinking about. Honestly, that was so early in the time that I was at the paper that I don't even know that this was a possibility that it would get submitted. So yeah, I just kind of went for it, and I don't think that I knew that it had been submitted. So I was really excited to see the win.
Now that you look back at it, do you say, you know what, that was a pretty good piece of work? Or are you
Yeah.
saying, it's just another day. I got to do another story tomorrow?
I mean, no, I was proud of it. Like, I kind of revisited it for the first time since we wrote it when we won the award. And I was like, okay, it's pretty good.
All right, that's pretty good. All right, so that was one, and that was a first place news award.
And you have to remember, like, we write so many stories, and even in the course of the year. So, I mean, there are stories that we go back and they only be like 6 months old, but we're reading for the first time sometimes because, we don't retain the memory of them. And, so it's fun reading them sometimes. So it's fun going back and reading the stories if we're a brand new reader to it.
I can appreciate that because there's always the next TV program that I got to do, and I finish one, and I look at my watch now, and I guess if I go down to my mailbox, I'll get this week's paper, and then I'm sure both of you are starting to think about next week's. Anyway, Michael Hinman, let's run down some of the other awards.
Oh yeah, so Kirsten also got second place in the same category by herself on a story she did about SAR Academy back when they had an administrator get charged, with approaching young boys and such. It was a kind of a scandal that could have went really bad. But what happened was SAR invited us to come and see the assembly they put together to talk to the students and the teachers and the parents. And, actually, I think it worked out pretty good for them. I think they kind of showed a lot of their transparency in that process. And Kirsten wrote a couple of fantastic stories, but we submitted one of them, and it won second place in the state, right?
And that was that story. What's fascinating to me is one is a broad analysis of state policy, and the other is like being on the scene and being, I don't know if it was exclusive, but you were on the scene and being able to tell what you saw with your own eyes. Two very different kinds of stories.
I think, Kirsten, we were the only ones there, weren't we? I don't remember if we were the only ones there.
Yeah, we were the only ones that had we were the only ones there, and I think that at the time the only outlet who had talked to the principal directly. So.
Well, there you go. So keep going, Michael. There's more.
Yeah, I mean, and then some of the other ones. I mean, we won second place in coverage of the arts. That was Raphael Laswaz. I can never say her last name right, and she'll laugh about that. Also, Julius Motal.
I hope she'll laugh about that.
I hope so too. But Julius Motal, who was our chief photographer at the time, and Tiffany Moustakis, who was actually Raphael's predecessor, all won in coverage of the arts. We took awards. I think I won an honorable mention for my firebombing story. So I did the anniversary of the newspaper's firebombing, which was like a 2,400 word epic that got honorable mention. So I'll take that. And then we also won some of what we call like the kind of the higher end awards. We were on the podium, basically third place for general excellence, which is like, one of the big awards. It's the overall, breakdown of the newspaper itself. So
that was a third place award.
Yeah. So, but even in the top 3 out of 107 is pretty good.
It's beyond pretty good.
Yeah. So this is our second year in a row where we got general excellence. We got third place in design, which is kind of bittersweet for me because my first year we were first place, and last year we were second place, and this year we were third place. But hey, we're still up there. But I feel like we're moving down.
Yeah, you can't win them all. Now that award is very personal to the Riverdale Press, isn't it?
It is. Yes, the design
why
award.
Don't you explain why?
Yes, because and it's great because Richie Stein, who's the son of the founder and the brother of Buddy Stein, who won the Pulitzer for the paper, been part of this paper as long as he's been alive, probably. Is a great designer, great newspaper designer, and and he and I were, because I also consider myself a pretty decent designer, so we like to clash a bit. We have our own different styles and such, but it's great. We have friendly clashes, but he's brilliant, and they actually named the design award after him. So when you win the award, so the first year we won it, we won the Richard L. Stein Award, and he won it too, which he thought was kind of weird. So
yeah, that is a little weird. Listen, that leads into something I want to talk to both of you about. When you, Michael, how long have you been with the Riverdale Press?
3.5 years now.
Now, when you applied for the job and they were looking for an editor, did you know about the paper? Did you research the paper? Because one of the reasons for asking is when I talked to you about the history of the paper and you talked about the firebombing, you seem to have a pretty good grasp of what the paper has covered, what the news has been like. And I'm curious about that process for, frankly, a very serious editor, somebody who really cares about journalism. When you applied for the job, where were you at as far as the Riverdale Press? And what did you do to get yourself so that you could be in the community and as personal and upfront as the Riverdale Press is? And frankly, Kirsten's going to get the same question.
Well, I mean, In general, I mean, being a journalist is nomadic. I mean, you end up being in a lot of different places where you have to learn the community inside and out fairly quickly. So I've been in towns, in small towns, especially in Florida, to where I'll research every single bit of history to the point where even natives who've lived there like 70 years think I grew up there because I know all kinds of really strange little facts, little things and little tidbits, because I am a big history buff as well. So here, I mean, when I first applied, I really knew nothing. I had kind of heard about the paper when it got firebombed. Like I remember reading about it when I was like 13,
It was an international story.
Yeah, it's a big story. I couldn't tell you what paper it was, where it was. I mean, I couldn't even tell you where the Bronx was on a map, let alone, the paper. But yeah, it really takes hours and hours of research. And I mean, trust me, I eat up every single thing I can. And then it also goes back to Richie Stein, who's filled with stories of all kinds. And
he's full of it, all right.
Yeah, he's full. I'm sure he's full of a lot of things. But
I only say that because we are friends, and I'm sure.
Yeah, and he's great. He's such a good resource on such. And I mean, and you can't talk about the history of Riverdale without talking about the Stein family, because I think they were such an influential aspect.
I want to get to Kirsten about the same thing. You'll have to remind me. Now you have been to the paper for about a year. And did you know about the Riverdale Press, or was it just, hey, I see they're looking for a reporter and I could use a job and this would be a good job? Or did you prepare? And one thing, by the way, I do want to comment on what Michael said. I hope that young journalists will understand the work it takes. There's, I guess, glamour or something in there that you're the writer for the paper. But what Michael Hinman just described was really what it takes to not only do a job like this, but do it really well. Anyway, Kirsten, I'm curious about you, or did you just show up and say, well, okay, now I got to do this?
Yeah, I mean, when I first saw the posting, exactly. I'll be honest, I was like a little over a year since I had graduated from college, and I just really wanted the job. And I looked at it and I was like, okay, this is at a local paper. Everything that they're looking for is something that I could do. But then obviously, as a reporter, I did research the paper before I applied, and I've also learned so much in the last year. Because often when you're looking for background on a story, the only coverage or the best coverage is the stuff that we've written in the past, be it available.
Especially when you're really essentially the only coverage in your area. So if you wanted to look about, the history of Van Cortlandt Park, I don't know, to me, the first place I would look is, searching the Riverdale Press. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And there have been times too that I have just Googled something and have found, sometimes it'll be a larger issue that was also covered in the Times or the Daily News, but that we were the ones who were following it the whole way through or had more detail because we were only covering this area. So
yeah. And that SAR story is as good an example as any. If the Times had done something about it, they might not have been there talking to the principal or whatever. Anyway, Michael, before we take a quick break, because I do want to talk about stories. After all, you do news. Is there anything else you want to add about that? I'm so proud of all of you who do it, and frankly, it's a question that answers itself. It's obvious that when you get an award like this, at what level you have to work, and it inspires you to work better. I just think it's great. So did you want to add any words before we take our break?
Well, yeah, I mean, we did win one other award that I was really, really proud of as well, which it was our first year. It was Best Front Page. We were second place in Front Page. And that's a big thing, because the front page is our cover, the front page of our paper. So
is that front page design?
Yeah, front page design. It's design, content. So they actually have like a lot of criteria with that, but a lot of it's design. A lot of it's the layout, the way it looks, and everything else. And we take that very seriously. Richie, when even though he and I do go back and forth on front pages, so sometimes I'll do them, but I've been doing them pretty much through the COVID crisis. But Richie does great front pages, and I try to emulate his excellence. And
is that for one particular front page, or for in essence they
it was a collection of front pages.
I see. All right, let's do this. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to talk about politics. We'll talk about the NYPD and Black Lives Matter, and things that Kirsten has been writing about. And if Michael has something to say, we may let him say it too. We'll be right back.
know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting from BronxNet,
we built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
We are back with you on the Bronx Buzz, and we're having a great time talking about the Riverdale Press and the work that they do with the editor of the paper, Michael Hinman, and staff reporter, political reporter, Kirsten Brendland. Kirsten, let's start right now with politics. You were there and you covered the convention that led to Andrew Cohen, Councilmember Cohen, being selected as a nominee for a judge. But there's been a lot of pushback about it. I mean, I've seen a lot of talk about it. Why don't you give your firsthand, she was there, impression about what happened and where we are at this point?
Yeah, so I mean, I know at this point it's been 2 years that everyone has been talking about the fact that Cohen might get the nomination, and we had found out earlier that day that was very likely to happen at the convention. So that night, I mean, it was really just everyone celebrating, obviously. Andrew was really excited. Jeff Dinowitz was there. He was really excited for Andrew. And it was sort of later when I was talking to people that there originally is really more critique of the whole process, that it's confusing and not super transparent, is what some people say about the way that people get nominated to the Supreme Court. And that there also is a little bit of frustration that Andrew is going to get pulled out in the middle of his term, and that'll trigger a special election at some point.
Although that doesn't appear to be the case, let's be fair, it looks like he's going to serve till December 31st, and then there would be a special, I mean, so I understand that was the dialogue. You know, what I like about you covering that is that it's kind of a combination. You know something about it, but I always think, you know, and I'm here all the time in the Bronx, I always think it's interesting when somebody, frankly, from the outside comes in and gets to look at it and provide us with a perspective like, hey, guess what? This is what you guys are doing. I mean, you know, it gets very insular on the inside. So looking from that perspective, how do you evaluate the process now? And Chantel Jackson, who is the Democratic nominee in the 79th Assembly District, she wrote frankly, a scathing letter about the process and how maybe we ought to redo things. So just what is your impression of the meeting and the process as you saw it?
Right. I mean, it was the first time that I've covered anything regarding the judicial convention or judgeships in the Bronx, and I was confused. And I think that is the way that a lot of people see it, especially people like, it's my job to understand it, and I was still confused. So
wow.
There's the whole deal with the delegates who get nominated, but sometimes those people don't appear on the ballot, so you're not even sure who's showing up at the convention. I think it's my impression that most people aren't even aware that the convention is going to happen or what the exact parameters of a civil court judge versus a Supreme Court judge are.
I think what you're saying is true, and I'm going to, having sat in, I would say this seat, but of course in the studio seat at BronxNet for a quarter century, it would not be a surprise to anybody that somebody thinks a fix was in. And the other thing I will add, and that will turn to Michael Hinman for, if you want to learn about the history of judgeships and appointing judgeships, all you got to do is search that in the Riverdale Press, because a little while back there was a scathing study done that really upset a lot of very entrenched people. So Michael, do you want to just weigh in on what happened this year and maybe even forecast what kinds of changes might happen in the future, if at all?
I don't know what kind of changes are going to happen. I mean, I know that, that there's a lot of Bronx political, party machinations here. I mean, there's a machine. I don't know how strong the machine is anymore. I mean, it's still pretty strong. I mean, I don't think anybody should count it out, but it's taken some serious blows. I mean, with Ruben Diaz going, Marcos Crespo going, Elliot Engel, getting toppled, Jeff Klein, gone. I mean, I think that there's definitely, some changes happening, but I mean, I think it's going to take almost an entire, revolt in order for it to change. I think it's.
Well, do you have? We don't have to get into it too deeply because it's just prognostication and who really knows. But I believe to some degree there is the germ of that. I mean, with people like Jamal Bowman, Richie Torres getting a congressional seat, you have 3 new assembly members. And now I was listing all the council members that are up for are going to be term limited, whether it's Andrew Cohn, Fernando Cabrera, Vanessa Gibson, Richie Torres is going to be out. I mean, you're talking about a lot of available space that, if you look at Bronx politics, it's going to be filled right now by people who are, frankly, kind of tired of this status quo. So it'll be very interesting. Kirsten, I want to move on before we run out of time. We did a show on Bronx Talk about, and the way I described it was 2 sides of the street. On one side of the street is Black Lives Matter, and the other side of the street is Blue Lives Matter. And that played out. You had done a story about Black Lives Matter marching on the 50th, and then very recently, we understand it's going to be in the paper this week, about Blue Lives Matter. And there was a fervent protest, if you will, or support of that sort of movement. How do you read what you've seen?
Yeah, so the protest that I had covered, I guess it happened 2 weeks ago, that was on the 50th, wasn't necessarily directed at the 50th. It was in response to the arrest of Nikki Stone, who was the 18-year-old who was arrested into the unmarked minivan in Manhattan, and Derek Ingram, who had a huge amount of NYPD officers come and try to arrest him, again, for something that happened quite a bit earlier. So it was sort of directed at the NYPD at large. It's just that the 50th is here. So that's where they ended up. But they did talk about, and I talked about in the article, that they had spoken about some things that had happened 3 years ago when a 16-year-old was arrested, and there was video of him getting punched in the head by officers from the 50th.
And so this is the first half of community people upset about things going on at the 5-0. Okay. And then on the other side of the street, why don't you talk about what you saw just the other day and will be in the Riverdale Press this week?
Yeah. I mean, so that was Mike's story, but the gist of it was that Sammy Ravello, who had run for Elliot Engel's seat in the primary, organized this Blue Lives Matter march that was over by Van Cortlandt Park. And I think that there is still, despite all of the criticism of the NYPD that's happened recently, there are still a lot of people who have family members who are in the NYPD or feel a lot of support for it, and feel that they're being unfairly attacked.
Mm-hmm. We only have about a minute and a half, and I'm going to give Michael Hinman a chance to weigh in on it.
Yeah,
definitely. We did a show on this on Bronx Talk, and there are assembly members, some as visible as Vanessa Gibson, who say, you know what, we need police, we want police. And the one thing I'll say in introduction to Michael's input on this, I got to tell you, it would not be a surprise to me if the police commissioner, who has history with the 5-0, paved the way for it to happen in the 5-0. I think we'd be naive to think that there was no input. That's just me guessing. Okay, Michael, you got about a minute to talk about what you saw at the Blue Lives Matter.
Well, I mean, it was interesting because I think that there's definitely opposing sides, but in all honesty, you know, from my own personal standpoint, I'm not sure that they have to be opposing sides. I don't believe that the movements have to be mutually exclusive. It's just understanding. I think that you know, I think we want to protect the lives, as many lives as we can. But yes, I mean, I think that we are seeing that people of color, Black people for sure, are definitely getting singled out more. And I don't know if that's accidental, if that's on purpose, or what's happening there, if it's just, you know, issues.
Or systemic, if you want to use that word.
Systemic, but it's happening, you know, and that's why we have to pay more attention to it. It doesn't mean that we're saying, you know, forget everybody else. It's saying that, that at least the lives of Black people are not being put at the same level as everybody else. And I think that that's something we really have to pay attention to personally.
And certainly the value of police officers in our neighborhoods. That was what the subject of what we had done on Bronx Talk. Listen, we three can bat all this stuff about, and there's many more issues. But one thing that is consistent, and that is the Riverdale Press is just a wonderful local paper. And one thing that Buddy Stein once said on an edition of Bronx Talk, when I asked him, why does Riverdale do so well? I said, I get the economy and the money and whatever. And he said, because it has a really good newspaper. And we keep the politicians in line and we keep people informed. And I think the Riverdale Press has a large role in that. Michael Hinman, the editor, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Kirsten Brendland, thank you so much for your fine work. And folks, guess what? We will see you next week. And what are we doing on Bronx Talk this week? Somehow I can't even remember. Oh, we're going to talk about young people getting jobs in the Bronx and how we can really amass kind of a new economy out of our young people. That'll be on Bronx Talk this week. Good night.